Hello, and welcome everyone to DragonCon Goes Virtual. You are watching the Science at a Distance panel. My name is Liz, and before I introduce all of our lovely panelists, I just want to go over the ground rules for all of you tonight. So this is live. We have a nice little set of topics that we'll cover, but we are going to leave some time at the end for questions. We have some of our wonderful science support team in Discord, YouTube, and Facebook monitoring for questions. So hopefully I'll be able to take in your feedback from those channels. But again, we are going to primarily address that at the end. So now without further ado, let me introduce everyone. We're going to go in alphabetical last name order. So we'll start with Dr. Paul Curry.
Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Curry. I teach science at a community college as well as manage health science programs. All kinds of fun things.
And the recently minted Dr. Jennifer Greco.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Greco. I just got my PhD, so I'm currently out of the University of Toledo in Ohio, but I will be moving in like 2 weeks out to Uppsala, Sweden, and I'm an astronomer, and my postdoc work is going to focus on extrasolar planets.
And Dr. Jessica Herbert.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Herbert. You say it like you're saying hello to Ernie's roommate. You say Herbert. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I am a postdoctoral scholar studying kidney function. I was a longtime placentologist, and I'm just here to prove that the placenta and the kidney, they're cousins, and it's fine. I'm also 1/3 of Portland Pop Trio Powerhouse and DragonCon guest for the last 2 years, and again this year, the PDX Broadsides.
And I am Dr. Lizzie Colbinaire. I am a postdoc turning senior scientist doing computational drug discovery in New York City. So welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I think across our set of panelists, we have all had different but equally difficult experiences with the changes that have come to how we both do our work and live our lives when everything moved to work from home starting approximately in March, at least I think for everyone involved here. And the work from home change has introduced a lot of new challenges in how we conduct science. So let's start with the problem that I think everyone has probably encountered at some point, which is, I'm sorry that my pet is causing problems in the Zoom meeting, or I'm sorry that my significant other or child is causing problems in the Google Hangouts meeting, and other issues that you all have encountered suddenly working from home in an environment that maybe is not your dedicated work environment. What sort of things have you run into on that front?
So my cat is notorious for attacking the camera. It did so even in a couple of the test screens. And I have a husky who will come in off screen and answer questions for me. Hopefully she won't do that during this panel, but if she does, just realize that her answers are the most correct.
My dog Lucy, who is a giant Muppet, doesn't usually come in and command the camera, but you can hear her very big bark, always at the most inopportune times during a panel or during a seminar. And I go, sorry, Lucy has an opinion. I did have to put a sign up on my door with a little slider about when I'm in video calls or I'm doing a Pomodoro or something, so that my husband doesn't come barging in here to show me the latest thing he found on ClickHole. He's more distracting than the dog.
Well, this is Loki, my office assistant. He thoroughly enjoys interrupting all of my Zoom meetings. The more important the meeting I'm in, the louder he walks into the room and starts howling. In fact, we were doing a meeting with the prospective grad students visiting my department, and he tried to hang up on my entire research group. So that was a good afternoon. Fortunately, most people have had a sense of humor about it, but I'm meeting my new postdoc advisor. Oh, I'm sorry, my cat's tail is hiding my face right now, but I promise I'm here. So it's been interesting for sure.
Have any of you had any other adjustments that you've had to make to how you do your work because of either not being in your office or in your lab, where you have necessarily reference material or access to things or different ways of working with things, or even ergonomic challenges? Has this change caused any problems?
Not so much ergonomic, but I mean, accessing data off campus can be hard. Learning how to access publications off campus, because a lot of them, we don't necessarily have subscriptions ourselves for them. That can be challenging. But I think the most challenging part about working from home for me is staying on task. And I found that Pomodoros, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and doing a cycle of 4, that those work sprints work really well for me as long as I stick to them.
Paul or Jen, any thoughts about staying on task, staying focused in a work environment that's maybe not your normal work environment?
I mean, I had a lot of the same problems you just mentioned. There were some challenges in getting some papers when I was trying to write sections of my thesis remotely. And so there were a couple times when I had to run into my office for 5 minutes just to download something I couldn't access from home. I found setting a schedule was really helpful for me. Like, there wasn't, anywhere I had to be at specific times, but I would set myself things to do at specific times, because otherwise it would just be, me doing whatever all day, and I wouldn't get as much done. And so I found that really helped my productivity, to be like, okay, I'm going to get up at this time, and then the first thing I'm going to do is do my grading, and then I'm going to write, and then I'm going to do, whatever. And that helped a lot for me.
For me, particularly on the education and the administration side, I sit at a computer here, I sit at a computer at an office. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. For me, it's actually been more ergonomic, making sure that things in the background when I'm doing my meetings, which pretty much last all day, are appropriate. We've had meetings where people have stood up and we know what kind of boxers they wear, those kinds of things. Superman.
Oh.
Yeah, that's been a source of amusement for a few years. I can't necessarily have my big wall of games behind me, or my giant Cthulhu over off to my left here. So that for me on the education side is, trying to make sure that the background, I usually actually have a big white screen that I put up behind me when I'm doing things from home, just to keep from not looking as deany as possible, I guess.
So on the subject of education, I know all three of you have been involved in education and science outreach. How has that changed, especially given how abrupt the work from home orders we all got have been?
It's been a lot. I helped design some online content for anatomy and physiology for one of the local universities. And how do you take something like biology, which is this innately hands-on bench science, and turn that into something that people can manipulate at home, or at least pretend to? So we've had to be very creative while also trying to protect professors and students alike from getting ill. But there has been an opportunity to do novel outreach, things that I wouldn't have been able to do 6 months ago or think I could do. I started a music show called Anthology, which actually has an all science edition tomorrow at 6 p.m. on the science track. And it's our 10th episode. So I get musicians together who used to play in a band, but now they can't because of COVID. And a lot of them also do things like science or STEM people. So I got a bunch of them together for tomorrow, and it's an all STEM show. So outreach takes different forms now, but we're still finding ways to share what we know and what we love.
For me, I manage a lot of health science programs, so we're trying to keep people on track, people graduating, particularly in the careers that are high demand right now for COVID. And so getting pulled right in the middle of March, that hurt. We had a lot of students that were 2 months out from graduation, 2 months out from taking exams like their NCLEX. That hurts. But fortunately, it was also really nice to see a lot of the organizations pull together. Across different states, the boards of nursing started allowing more and more virtual time to be counted towards clinicals to get these people out. We had a lot of publishers step up and provide a lot of their stuff for free, at least for the first few months. Others offered theirs at great discounts, and that helped me get all of our programs in it going. We were only about 2 weeks behind on graduation for most of our health sciences because of what the boards and what the publishers were doing. So that was really nice to see.
I know for me, I, as a grad student, was a TA and not an instructor. So the big challenge for us was getting everyone on the same page, because if you were working with different professors, I mean, we all got put online very short notice. And so everybody had a different opinion about how something was going to be done. And so our big challenge as grad TAs was trying to figure out what we were supposed to be doing and communicating with the faculty to get everyone on the same page about what was expected. And the big challenge with the students was keeping them involved, because they would, they'd turn in their work, but if they had questions, they wouldn't contact me or come to office hours. And so trying to get them involved and work with them and get them to communicate with us when they needed help was the big challenge for us.
So I feel like this got touched on briefly, but I wanted to focus in more on, for those of you, less Jen because the stars are far away, but for those of you who've had, either teaching responsibilities or research responsibilities that involve hands-on in lab work, how have you handled that?
I got very lucky in that I was wrapping up a couple of projects, and then I was job hunting. So, and I think we'll talk about that subject in a little bit. But I was able to take the data that I had home and write on papers and things here. But even now, I've joined a new lab, and I got to do my first bench experiment today, and I was hired in that lab July 20th. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
For me, I've been doing science at a distance for years. I started in 12 years ago with the Human Anatomy and Physiology Online, including virtual labs. I've got general chemistry and organic chemistry online, and the general chemistry has kitchen labs. So for me, it wasn't that hard of a switch. There are some demos that I can do at home that are a lot easier. My action potential demonstration, which involves the use of a toilet, because a toilet is a great explanation of an action potential, right? A lot easier, because at the school, they look at me funny when I try to crowd a class into the bathroom. Plus, we've got those fancy ones that don't have the tank toilets. And if you don't have a tank toilet, it doesn't work like an action potential. And you can see the reactions, because everybody knows, yeah, he's right. That is exactly how an action potential works. You push down on you touch the handle, nothing happens. You got to reach threshold. Got to get that flapper up. It's all or nothing once it starts. See, there's even a latent, a refractory period. So, yeah, it's a great system. Worked really well in my anatomy and physiology this summer.
And Jen, you were hinting at this before, talking about accessing things from campus and having to go in and do that. Could you elaborate on what do you mean by that sort of issue?
Sure. So for me, it was two things. One of them was accessing academic journal articles. So there are some journals that, in order to get the articles out of them, you have to have a subscription to them. And so while my university subscribes to those journals, I as an individual do not. So when I try to access them from my internet at home, I'm unable to get a lot of those articles. But when I access them from the internet on campus, I'm able to access them. And so what I would do in cases where I had resources I honestly couldn't get any other way, is I would take my laptop into campus for 15, 20 minutes and download all the papers that I needed. And then I would have copies of them on my laptop at home. And I did the same thing when I had to download telescope data because my home internet is terrible. And so when I needed to download large volumes of telescope data, I would sneak my laptop into campus for half an hour because it would take me 30 minutes instead of a couple days to download observing data. So that was also very helpful.
How large is telescope data?
It depends on what you're doing. When I do a night of observing for my thesis, I would get a few gigabytes worth. If you have an individual observation, it kind of depends on the telescope it was taken with. I was given some Gemini data right when lockdown started, and that was several gigabytes worth of stuff that I had to download.
Wow.
No bueno on my home internet.
I was really lucky that OHSU, my home institution, has a proxy button that when you're off campus, you can get whatever journals you want to through your institutional login. So that made paper writing at home really easy. But anytime I needed, like you said, I've got large image data from like 3D scans, or I had a pile of RNA-seq data, I can't easily bring that home. So I would have to go in and compact it in a way that I could bring it home with me.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of paper writing, at least I know in my case, I'm very used to being able to turn around and talk to my collaborators who are either next to me or an office over. How has that changed for all of you?
I greatly missed that while problem solving some things for my dissertation, especially because we had 3 students in my department who were all defending. We had 3 thesis defenses in 8 days. And so we were doing a lot of things, paperwork we had to submit or other things we had to do that we would all do at the same time. And so the ability to talk with them was something that I greatly missed. So one thing that we did as a department is we created a grad student Discord channel. And it gave us a place where we could ask questions and get answers a little bit more quickly than by email, and try to replace some of that in-person interaction that we weren't getting. And it wasn't the same, but it was a huge help for us, for sure.
For me, there was, when I switched labs, there was also a culture change. So in my previous postdoc, I had communication was not great. So we would have a WebEx meeting like once every 2 or 3 weeks as a lab to chat. And then the rest was sort of by sporadic email. Where my new lab, we all adopted Microsoft Teams almost like immediately as soon as it became available at our university, and we all use it constantly. We're in constant contact. We meet twice a week on WebEx, once for a meeting and once for a journal club. So we're staying far more connected, and I feel better that way. You still get that sort of presence of absence where you miss them because you can see them, but they're not in the same room as you. But it's better than feeling like you're completely isolated.
Ours, kind of along the same lines, Jessica. We've had actually more contact at a distance than we ever had in person. We have more people show up at meetings because they don't have to drive or anything like that. Like Jessica, we're also a Teams college. We've had to teach people how to use some of the document editing things because it does really good, for a Microsoft product. It does really good collaborative document editing. You can put in the comments, see who's made the edits, and you can actually do a paper with other people without having to be in the same room. That's been kind of helpful. But we've also had a lot of people having to learn how to do that and not wanting to do it at the same time. They are on the bandwagon. Oh, this is only going to last a month. And that's been their bandwagon for the last 6 months.
I have had to deal with similar colleagues, but on the flip side of this, using online communication to feel more connected to your colleagues, do you feel that you are expected to be on more, that you're expected to be more reachable, or that you're work-life balance is doing better or worse than it was before the quarantine?
So funny you should mention that. Again, Teams, sorry. I had one of my faculty members contact me last night, 8 or 9-ish. She said the green light was on, so I thought I'd try. My fault for not changing my status or anything like that. And I actually did take a call. We got stuff done. But she's also one of those faculty who she tends to work evenings. And so having me available to her in the evenings has helped. I mean, she does my night classes, stuff like that. So why not support her when she's around rather than making her get up early to, meet with me?
I'll be honest, I think my work-life balance has been better, and where I don't feel like I've been anticipated to be more accessible, but as someone who was already really connected to social media and communications, I was already pretty darn accessible. Mm-hmm. So the change has been, I think that I used to go into the lab to put in FaceTime so everybody felt like they were seeing me. And now if I'm at home and it's 2 p.m. and I need to take a break, I don't feel bad if nobody can see me. They can email me, they can reach me through all the ways, and I'll get back to them when I get back. And I don't feel bad about it. So that has been a pretty great shift, actually, in terms of my work-life balance.
I mean, I was a few months from defending my dissertation when all this started, so I think no matter what happened, my work-life balance would have been really terrible. And so the challenge for me was that my research advisor has a small child, and so our sort of face-to-face, we would do Zoom meetings, and those sort of inherently had to be later in the afternoon towards the evening because he was busy with his kid during the day a lot of times. And so that made exchanging edits for us a little bit more complicated. And that meant that we couldn't have as much discussion during the day as maybe we would have if we'd been face-to-face on campus. We did more of it in the evenings. But other than that, I mean, I feel like I would have been working all the waking hours, quarantine or no. So in that sense, I don't think it shifted my meetings time, sure, but I don't think it had a huge effect on things other than that. And since I defended, I've been trying to wrap some things up, and it's been a little bit more the schedule I had before lockdown since then.
So on the subject of defenses and moving forward, I know for a lot of people in academia, the way that you find your next step and continue your career is academic conferences. That's where I found one of my internships and found a lot of opportunities coming out of grad school. I know in some fields are basically obligatory for finding your next steps. And like DragonCon, pretty much every academic conference this year has either been canceled or gone virtual. How has this impacted both, each of you directly? And could you tell me a bit about the role that conferences play in your field?
So for me, conferences are huge. They are, just for me personally, as well as for the faculty that I manage, they have to get their professional development, things like that. One of the nice things about going virtual is most of them have gone free as well. Mm. And when you're looking at 25% budget cuts, being able to do the professional development for free has been really nice. We've gotten more faculty actually going to these conferences now because they're virtual, because we don't have to stretch our PD dollars or, no, you went to one last year, it's so-and-so's turn because they haven't gone to PD in 5 years. So yeah, for me, it's been actually really nice to have some of this virtual aspect. That being said, I miss some of the interactions. There are some things that still aren't set up on the virtuals. You don't usually have the job board, so to speak, that you run into a lot of these conferences. The technology's there. It's just the people running the conferences are having to switch to this mode so fast. They haven't had the opportunity to explore everything that would be available to them to fully make it virtual.
On March 6th, I flew up to Vancouver, BC for the Society for Reproductive Investigation Conference. And that's kind of the biggest one for placentologists all year. I know all of you out there already knew that, but just in case somebody, when big placenta conferences were, they're in March. And I had planned to use that step to move on to either a new postdoc or a junior fac position. And 15 hours after I got there, they canceled the conference, and my university sent out a message saying, if you're not here, maybe you need to get here. So it was a scramble to book flights and get home. And of course, every other conference for the year got canceled. So what do you do when you are an early career person trying to build your career and you're dependent upon those networking connections? You're dependent upon who's got jobs and who knows who. And all of a sudden, you get the virtual space. It's good and it's bad. You get to attend things that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily been able to afford to go to before, like Paul was saying. But you don't get the face-to-face, and you lose a lot in doing that. And some of the conferences can't afford to go free. They're still charging. And if they don't get the attendance that they need, those societies are going to collapse. So it's a rough year for conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. In a way, I got really lucky because the big job hunting conference for me was in January, and I accepted my postdoc in late February. So I feel a little bad looking at people who are having trouble job hunting because I got in just under the wire before lockdown started. And I wasn't going to do a lot of conferences this summer anyway because I'm moving. But I do know from talking to some colleagues that have been doing them that they're having a lot of the same issues you've been talking about, where it's nice that they can access content they wouldn't have otherwise been able to, but they're missing a lot of that face-to-face interaction. And I know some people who've been having trouble with time zones, because I have a friend who's in Hawaii, for example, and the conferences are almost never in the right time zone for her. And so she's having to do, talks at 3 a.m. and things like that. That's maybe an issue that you wouldn't have in in-person conferences.
I just wanted to add in another conference. The APS March meeting was also canceled right at the beginning of March after everyone had already arrived. Which was a similar. It was not good because you had a lot of international attendees who'd flown in, and once you take the flight, you can't get a refund, which has caused issues for a number of students where they flew in, spent that money, but there was no conference, so they couldn't get reimbursed. And I still, unfortunately, don't know how those issues have ended up.
My university reimbursed me for my flight, even though the conference had been canceled, because I went in good faith that the conference was happening. So I really hope that there are reimbursements for those people as well.
I hope so too. There's been a lot that's happened. So sort of rolling this back together, out of the changes that have happened in your science experiences, which ones do you think will stick? Which ones do you want to keep? And which ones, I guess, tying into a previous panel some of us recorded, which ones do you want to yeet?
Well, right off the bat, I'm stuck with Teams. That is not going to go away afterwards. It's got some nice benefits. My faculty finally figured out that we don't all have to come to the same campus every month to have a meeting, that we can just, sit around and do it from home or from our office or whatever. We've been trying to get them to do this for years, and, Corona actually made it happen. So, I guess small victories. There was a joke I saw on Twitter, but it's also true. It's the student realizing they'll never have another snow day because they figured out that they can keep the education system going even when the buildings aren't accessible. And while I still think snow days are going to happen, it has helped, particularly with my college, and I live in a pretty remote area in Eastern Kentucky, where getting to our campuses is not something that all the students are capable of doing. It's just, pick your reason. And so our ability to have students attend a in-person class but done through a webcam, where the faculty member is in their lab, they're going through the lecture, they're pulling up all their demonstrations, the students can see all of this stuff, they can interact with them in real time. That's going to stick around, and I think that's going to be a very useful modality moving forward. Again, it's one we've been trying to get people to use for a couple of years, and once they got forced to do it and realized that yes, it can be done, and the crazy dean wasn't that crazy at all, that's helped. For me, those are kind of the big things. I think you're also going to see, particularly with some of the smaller colleges, them downsizing as far as facilities goes, because they're learning they don't necessarily have to have their faculty on 5 campuses. They can maybe condense down and have one campus for the live classrooms, and then have still the same number of faculty, but offering classes either synchronous or asynchronous in an online format.
I think that this is going to help normalize working from home. And it's a thing that I know folks with disabilities have been asking for a very long time, and they were told, oh, this can't be done, this can't be done. Well, now we can show that it can be done. So I am hopeful that there's a lot more thought into accessibility and into like boundaries and protecting time. My new lab is very big believer in, are you feeling off? Does your family need to see you a little bit more today? Like, take the time and don't worry about it. And I hope that there's a lot more of that to go around in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think working from home, being more normalized is going to be a big benefit for my department as well, because we have a number of people with small children who sometimes have days where they just can't make it into the office, and having that be more normalized and having video meetings be sort of more normalized will be really helpful there, because if there's a day when, someone can't make it into the office, well, why don't we meet by Zoom? And I think that having everyone get sort of more used to that has been really helpful, and will continue to be helpful when situations like that arise. I think it's sort of been an interesting side effect for my department. We made a Discord for the grad students, as I mentioned, and then we added the incoming first years to it. And then that gave them a venue where they could ask us all questions. They'd be like, all right, I'm looking for an apartment. Is this a good neighborhood? And immediately, whatever grad student was online could get back to them right away. And while they were doing their grad orientation, they could be like, we heard this in orientation today and we're concerned about it. Can we talk to someone about it in real time? And that allowed us to integrate the incoming first year students much more quickly than we usually do. And we all looked at each other and went, why don't we do this every year? And I think we will continue to do that every year for the incoming first year students, just because it made such a difference for them. And that was really awesome. Yeah, I think that's all I can think of. In terms of doing video meetings, my advisor and I would frequently not meet if there was a week where one of us couldn't come in for some reason. But I think with video meetings becoming more prominent, we would probably just choose to meet by Zoom now, and that would allow us to meet a little more if we needed to as well. So
we are still seeing, at least at my college, some of the old guard who, have had people working from home for 6 months, and they still don't believe they can be working from home. Just roll with it. It's academics. There is no but. They're like, oh, they're not working. They're goofing off. Then how did that report get done? They're goofing off, and you still run into that mentality. But 6 months into this, and they are starting to realize that, okay, maybe grudgingly, I'll acknowledge that this person is working from home sometimes, but most people are just using it as an excuse to goof off. I get that in a meeting every single week. And I've had it in a meeting every single week for 6 months. And to me, that's one of those things where there are people that have to accept the fact that the world has changed. There are, as this part of the conversation is turned. There are parts of this that are going to stay ingrained in the way we do things. One of the nice things, I've got an employee who has an elderly mother at home. Because she can work from home, she's able to take care of her, and she's not seen the decline that they were anticipating with her, because there's been that ability. And even though now we're partially back in person with my college, the attitude I have is, hey, if you need to stay home, take care of her, go online, just let your faculty, just let me know. We'll keep going.
The shame about doing these online web meetings is you can't reach over to the faculty member who says, oh, my students or my techs or my employees are just goofing off at home. You can't reach over and just smack the heck out of them.
No, but you can
can't
post a
touch
GIF.
them.
But you can mute them. You can
I was
mute
gonna
them.
say, if you're the meeting host, you can mute them, which is almost as fun.
I like the idea of posting a GIF, perhaps a Dr. Cox GIF, just to get your point across.
So we've talked about the positive parts. At least at the beginning, what for each of you was the biggest unexpected challenge you faced, whether on day 1 or day 100?
All right, so I got to jump on this one, because my biggest thing, so Kentucky has a position that was required to reopen called a Healthy at Work officer. And their job is to maintain compliance with executive mandates as well as any mandates of the employer. And I'm that person for my college. So I have 500 people on campus on any given day who it's my job to make sure that they don't become a COVID cluster. I don't want to have the headline, and I'm going to win the point. UNC's UNC Chapel Hill, their student newspaper had, and I'm paraphrasing, but pretty close to the exact wording, UNC a clusterfuck of COVID. And that was,
you took our F-bomb.
I had to, because of that one headline.
Oh.
And I kid you not, look it up. You will see that was the actual headline. About,
we get one F-bomb, but at least, you know what? That was a good use of it.
It was, yeah. Because and I will point out here, the local high school had one football practice. The day before that football practice, we had 30 cases total in the county across 4 months. A month later, we broke 200, and every single one of them could be traced back to that one football practice.
Oh, no.
Yikes.
Yeah. So for me, that's been the real kind of stressor, is making sure that when we're opening and we're bringing not only the employees, but the students back and putting them into hospitals, things like that, that everybody is as safe as possible. It's mitigation, it's not prevention. And we've only actually had one positive on campus, and that was because the kid took 2 tests. One was positive, one was negative, and he decided to believe the negative. So yeah, you can't. Yeah, but we caught it early. Within a few minutes, he was off campus. But and realistically, he was probably negative because the secondary test was the better test. It wasn't one of the rapid tests. So, and this was in the early stages of the rapid test.
I think one of the unexpected challenges for me was the way that some professors in particular don't want to change, and they go, well, the rule doesn't apply to me. And so as long as everybody else is gone, my people can still come in as long as they're staying 6 feet apart. Like, no, if we don't need to be here, we don't need to be here. And drilling that in has been really difficult, and some of them are still not doing it. So I think that until that is overcome, or the old guard dies, maybe of COVID, we're not going to see a change. And we're going to be sitting with this for a lot longer than we could be if everyone just stayed at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, and I don't know whether I would call this necessarily unexpected or not, but I'm someone who works much better around other people than I do working from home. And so for me, it was getting used to working by myself because I live alone with my cat. And while he's wonderful, he can't tell me how to fix my Python code. And so it was figuring out how to substitute for that in-person interaction where I used to be able to walk across the hall to someone's office and ask them a question. Or, you know, when I got stuck, I could turn and talk to my office mate for 5 minutes. And so, you know, having the Discord and doing lots of video chats with people, and we would set it up where if somebody had a question, you'd text them and say, hey, I have a Python question. Can I call you for 10 minutes? And things like that were really helpful for just trying to keep that community together for us and be able to work collaboratively with each other as much as we could.
So I've been getting a few questions from the audience, which I'm going to now turn to. So the first comes from iChef at Discord. And they ask, how is the snake fight portion of the thesis defense done remotely? Is the snake sent by mail? Does one fight the snake via Zoom? I think this question was probably aimed at Jen.
I suspect this question is aimed at me. Hi, Isaac. This is a little funnier because Isaac was attending my thesis defense via Zoom. Well, I fought the snake via Zoom, so I actually did my thesis defense. I had a couple family members who had traveled to be here, and they were in the room with me. But other than that, the whole thing was done via Zoom. And that was both weird because I couldn't read the room and, you know, sort of gauge whether people were understanding the explanations I was giving when I was talking about things, which made giving the presentation harder. But it was also really cool because it enabled me to involve people who live far away, who wouldn't have been able to attend in person, who had never seen me give a talk before. And so that enabled me to have them at my thesis defense and allow them to be involved, which was something that was really special and really cool. As for the snake fight, it's usually what we call the section with your committee after you do the public talk. And that was done via Zoom. We all and it was, I expected it to be a little weirder than it was, but because there were only 6 of us, it was actually pretty straightforward to kind of tell who was saying what. And the snake was not as difficult to fight as anticipated. So that was good as well.
So now we have Noisy Nicole, Space and Science at Discord, and they ask, how do you foster working relationships with your students from a distance, both in classes and research?
I mean, I'll be straight up. It's hard because especially when you're developing a mentor-mentee relationship with a student that you might only have for a short amount of time, like a semester, you do rely on that face-to-face and that personal interaction. I would say the first and most important thing is empathy, to let them know right away that you understand that this is a difficult time and you're not going to make it more difficult on them. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to say, you have to be participating X number of days and you have to have your video on. And some of the rules that I've seen on syllabi have been absolutely archaic and ridiculous. Like, you have to be operating with empathy during this time or your students aren't going to trust you at all. And also you're a shit human being. So yeah, I'm going to take one. I'm going to take one of them. So I would also say that instead of calling them office hours, I've been calling them student hours. And so that students feel a little bit more like office hours sounds like, well, I am in my office, but it sounds like I'm doing work and don't bother me. And when I call them student hours, they know that that time is for them. So that has been helpful. And with my mentees, I do schedule one-on-one meetings and I make sure to have kind of a wrap up at the end of either an experiment or at the end of like whatever small project we're working on that day to say, here are the things I think went really well. Here's what we can improve for next time. So just having that like little bit of a summary every time, but if you take nothing else from what I said, act with empathy.
I love that. I do. I'm actually going to answer this as a student and sort of talk about what helped me. And empathy was huge. It really was, because there were weeks when I had a really bad week, and my email to my advisor that week would be, I'm really sorry I didn't get it done this week because it was a terrible week. And having him be understanding about that made all the difference for me. And I would add to that communication. Because I think it's really easy when, at least it's for me, when I'm not face-to-face interacting with someone regularly, to just when I get super stressed, I just won't communicate. And so making sure that my advisor was communicating with me and I was communicating with him was huge, and just making sure that we both knew what was going on, as we were acting on a very short timetable, and that I was communicating with all of the collaborators who needed to know what was going on with various stages of the project. So emails and text messages and regular Zoom meetings and all that, to just keep everybody on the same page.
So after a decade of teaching online or more, a couple of tips that I've learned that I shared with my faculty when we're going on. Number one, respond to your email within 24 hours, even if it's a weekend. That right there, it's a little thing to check your email on the weekend for faculty. I know a lot of them, I've clocked out, it's the end, but responding to those online students within 24 hours, regardless of holidays or things like that, means the world to them. And the other one is, as you guys have mentioned, is build the class to be flexible. Let life happen. You know, if you can be flexible with your due dates, be flexible with your due dates. If you can't be flexible with your due dates, plan your due dates slightly earlier than you really want it turned in, and then you can be flexible. I know that sounds cheesy, but I will say I make everything due the middle of finals week. But I have until the end of finals week to really get everything in. So if somebody comes to me saying, hey, something happened, I need a few extra days, I can give them a few extra days without having to go to an incomplete or some other form of term extension. And, you know, it gives them that, you know, this is a professor who wants me to succeed, and get them forward and moving. And those two little things are great to go with.
I fully agree with being flexible in your schedules, and that prompt response is important, but I also believe in setting boundaries, and I'm also a human being dealing with this pandemic. So if I don't respond to a student on the weekends or a mentee on the weekends, it's not that I don't love them, it's that mama needs her own time, okay? And I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you email me on a Monday, and I scare students all the time because they'll email me at 2:30 in the morning and I respond right away because I'm a night owl. But I mean, that's because I can, not because I have to. And those are important boundaries. If you're a teacher out there and you're thinking, do I respond on the weekends because I'm home anyway during the week, and the weekend it's not different? It is different. Make sure that you are setting boundaries of time for yourself.
Yeah, definitely always have time. And which is why I always do that kind of 24-hour rule, or set up a note. Just say, hey, I don't respond on weekends. Let them know from the get-go not to expect it or to expect it. That's the thing.
Expectations managed. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Use that syllabus. Snoop Dogg read it.
It was so good. It was so good.
Jessica said exactly what I was going to say, and setting boundaries in terms of, just because I am up working at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, if I get a bunch of student emails and I'm about to go to bed, it's okay to go to bed and answer them in the morning, was a really important lesson for me to learn, because if I'm at home working all the time, I will work all the time. And so remembering to set those boundaries, and then it was okay to take time for me or admit that I needed to answer that email in the morning and go to bed, was huge. So I absolutely loved that you brought that up.
So on a sort of different approach to, among other things, time zones and late nights, we have ABOD93 at YouTube asking, do you think it will start to trend to allow students from around the country/world to attend any school they want, due to the ability to learn online?
I'm going to say no. And the reason for that being there are online schools already that are perfectly successful. And there are schools that have a physical presence that also allow for online training. However, I don't think that if you're going to be attending, say, Harvard, I don't think Harvard's going to go to an all online format anytime soon. I think that schools are going to go back to a mostly in-person model as soon as there's a vaccine and that vaccine is working.
So from the administrative side point, the sheer amount of red tape that would be required, I mean, it's a big deal to teach across state lines. Fortunately now we have the collaborative known as NC-SARA, which helps colleges, particularly the public institutions, cross state lines with their online classes. But the reason why you see so many of those privates have a building in some town is because the requirements to offer classes in that state is to have a brick and mortar presence somewhere, even if it's just a secretary sitting in a room. And so when you start talking about crossing country borders, it becomes infinitely more complicated. So it's not going to happen, or at least not on that kind of scale.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've all learned from this sort of the limits of what can be done online versus what can be done better in person. And so I think once the option to do things in person becomes available again, universities will veer away from all online programs because there simply isn't a good online substitute for things like an in-person lab course, for example.
So to close things out, and let's keep this question from getting too dark. If you could go back to week 1 of whenever things changed for you, whenever you were given the work from home notice, and change one thing that you did or give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Whew. I guess I would tell myself upfront and repeatedly that this is a marathon, not a sprint. If I could go back and know that we're still in this 6 months later, I would say this is not you're going to be out of the lab for 1 month. Just take your data and it'll be fine. Like, this is going to be a long time, and it is going to permanently change the way that we do science. So take it slowly, be gentle with yourself, and don't feel like you have to cram everything in at home just to prove that you're being productive. Because I felt like I was working some crazy long weeks at home to write because I wasn't at the bench. So what what I was doing, was it real science because I was home? You got to take it easy with yourself, and you will find the balance. We're still in it, and we're going to be in it for a while.
I think if I could tell myself one thing, it would simply be, it's going to be okay and you are going to graduate. Because there were some rough days for sure. And so I think I would look myself in the eye and tell myself to take a deep breath, first of all. And as for the advice, I think it would be setting a schedule earlier, because that really helped me in just, deciding when I was going to do things and what time I was going to use for work, and reminding myself that it was okay to take breaks. And I would often schedule when I was going to take breaks during the day. And that made a huge difference. And I wish I'd done it earlier.
For me, I guess, and this one's going to kind of sound mean, but then I've got to put it in context. I would tell myself not to have donated as much PPE to the hospitals as we did. Because when we started easing restrictions and their need became more desperate, they turned around and told us that our students that are going in to learn how to do things their way had to provide their own PPE. So what we've donated to them is not only all the PPE that we had on hand at the time in April and March, but every bit of PPE I could get my hands on over the last 3 months. And for college, again, 25% budget cut, that's rough. You know, that's been about $20,000-$30,000 in just gloves and masks to get students in. So for me, it would have been, yeah, don't donate. Not to say they didn't need it, but we also need it to get them what they want, which is more nurses.
What does the return story look like for each of you?
It's been strange. I mean, when I left one postdoc, and I'm returning to the lab in a totally different one. And I mean, the job shift alone has been pretty significant. But what a return looks like for us is it's still slow, and my new lab is expanding space to give more people room to move so that we can have a few more people in there, because a space that used to be okay for 4 people is now questionably okay for 2. We're trying to keep distance. There are experiments that require at least 2 pairs of hands if we're going to do like a perfusion. And now everybody has to wear full-on face masks, and there's extra PPE involved. You have to keep in mind exposure times. Yeah, it is a challenge, and we're still spending as much time at home as possible. As my mentor says, if you're not holding a pipette, you need to be home. So that's kind of what we're doing, as much work from home as possible, where a year ago, it didn't matter if I was going to be doing bench work. Even if I was writing, I was kind of expected to be at the bench putting in FaceTime.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I left work at the beginning of quarantine, I was a grad student at one university, and heading back in the fall, I will be a postdoc on another continent. And so I have no idea what heading back is going to look like. I'm moving in the next few weeks, and so this will be a weird time to enter a new department and try to sort of build those collaborative relationships with new colleagues while still doing the social distancing. And I know that's going to be a challenge. And so it'll be interesting to see how all of that comes together, because we have several new postdocs starting at the same time. So at least we'll all be in the same boat together, and hopefully that'll help each of us figure out how to get acclimated better.
Will you have to quarantine when you get there?
Well, when someone tells me that, I'll let you know. We're still working all that out. I know my cat doesn't have to quarantine, but no one's told me yet whether or not I have to. The answer is probably yes, but I have not been given any details yet. So I'm assuming yes until told otherwise.
So the visual representation of what my return looks like is this. So not overly happy. We've actually already started the return. We've had classes operating on our facilities for 3 weeks. We're about to start week 4 now. We had limited clinical experiences going on during the summer. We were really only shut down for about 2 months before we started doing things in a limited capacity. As you guys said, it's been the distancing, it's been keeping those rooms, reevaluating the size of the room and how many people we can put in there. But it hasn't stopped the number of students. So we've had to put classes in 2 rooms where there's a TV that connects them and a camera. So the faculty is in one room lecturing to a group of students. And then there's the overflow room that you'd find at a lot of cons. With that, yeah, overflow rooms in college, imagine. But, you know, rooms that could hold 30 students now can hold 12. And so, you know, that's been the kind of big change in what it looks like for us, is just reevaluating our spacing.
So I wanted to say thank you all for joining us and talking about how your lives have changed. Where can I find each of you online if I wanted to follow what you do? Starting just going alphabetically by last name again with Paul.
You can find me on Twitter at Cthulhu_Chaos, and you can find a lot of my photography, which is a lot of cosplayers and a lot of wildlife, at Cthulhu'sChaos.com.
And Jen?
You can find me on Twitter at AstroGrecoJ, and I'll also be in the Discord for a while this evening as well, if anyone has follow-up questions they want to ask.
And Jessica?
You can find me, I'm at Dame DNA on Twitter, and I'm also at PDX Broadsides, pdxbroadsides.com for all your nerdy music pop needs. And check out Anthology tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern here on the Science Track.
And you can find me on Twitter at Telekahath, and I will also be in the Science Track Discord all weekend long. So hope to hear from y'all. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining us. Thank the three of you for speaking and answering all of my strange questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of their DragonCon Goes Virtual, and I sincerely hope I get to see all of you in 2021 happy and healthy. Stay fantastic.
We hope so too.
We hope so too.